Are we still sisters?
Nothing is ever going to change that.
Hello everybody, I'm Zenith Warrior Princess, the cutest of buns, and welcome back to Zen TV, where I take a look at one of the numerous different shows in my collection. Today is a bit different, however, since the show we are discussing is a Netflix original series, meaning that I can't add it to my collection just yet due to it being digital only. Normally, I would be opposed to covering shows that are strictly available on streaming. However, this is actually another patron-sponsored review, this time courtesy of Kyle Huxtable, and I have absolutely no qualms about covering a show when I'm paid to cover it, even if it is a streaming exclusive. Heck, Kyle's next request after this is the first season of The Umbrella Academy, so it won't be the last I cover regardless. And secondly, and perhaps most importantly, I have a bit of history with this franchise in some way, shape, or form at least, and I suspect that down the line, I will be able to get a physical copy when Netflix inevitably loses the license. In any event, today we are diving into the 2021 smash hit based on Riot Games' League of Legends, Arcane. Now, this may come as a shock to you, but I wasn't always a console gamer. As I mentioned way back in the first part of the Humongous Entertainment retrospective, I actually got my start playing games on the PC. It began with edutainment games, retro game compilations, and licensed games like Monopoly, but eventually I was hooked on PC games. While I had a few NES and SNES games, they were far too hard for me to complete, so I focused on stuff like Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, Pajama Sam, the Clue Finder series, and Oregon Trail. Those were much more my speed, and I spent a large portion of my elementary years on the PC. As I grew older, I was allowed to play more complex games, and I started getting into Age of Empires, which was a real-time strategy game based on history. I adored Age of Empires 3 in particular, and would spend hours on end just building my empire from the ground up. This was the time where I was super into RTS games and played StarCraft at my friend's house in our free time. In high school, I switched over to consoles with the PlayStation 2 as a hub for DVDs and RPGs, and in college, I focused on schoolwork most of the time since I couldn't bring my PS3 with me to campus during the first 2 years. However, this is where my PC history comes into play. During my second year of college, I roomed with a friend I had made from the Philippines named Isaiah. He was strictly a PC gamer and spent a lot of his time playing old school Blizzard games. We became best friends, and in our last few years, we stayed in off-campus housing together while he played a game that is surprisingly relevant to today's proceedings. I didn't know much about it at the time, and since this was around early 2011, it meant that I had started focusing on making videos back then. But I kept hearing the noises from the game announcing the kill streak.
Ultra kill! Triple kill! Holy shit!
Honestly, I had to stop what I was doing and ask him what he was playing because I was dying laughing at the commentary. It turns out that he was playing a MOBA called Dota, which may sound like just a string of letters to most people, but it stands for a multiplayer online battle arena game called Defense of the Ancients. Defense of the Ancients, or Dota for short, actually originated as a Warcraft 3 mod that allowed players to pit their heroes against each other in direct player versus player combat. It then was snatched up by Valve to become its own series and has grown in popularity over the years. I played it a bit with Isaiah, but I'm not really one for multiplayer games, so it only lasted a few sessions. Though I did enjoy my time with the game overall, thanks to how relaxing it was and being able to play with Isaiah in general. Once college was over though, I went right back to console games since I finally had capture card tech that I could use. Fraps and other screen grab tech at the time wasn't all that great, and I wanted my game reviews to look better. Interestingly enough though, during one stream that I was doing a couple years back, I made a joke about Dota and the multi-kill banners, and one of the commenters said that I was actually thinking about Unreal Tournament or League of Legends. I'd never played Unreal Tournament games myself, so that couldn't be it. But League of Legends was a good guess, seeing how Dota was instrumental in creating it. League of Legends is a MOBA created by Riot Games that was heavily inspired by Dota to the point that it has a nearly identical kill commentary. It consists of 2 teams of 5 players, each defending one side of a map. The only difference seems to be the fact that League is free to play and makes money through dreaded microtransactions. I can't say much more than that because honestly, I don't know anything else about the game itself. I hear people talking about it a lot, and how the community is apparently insanely toxic, but that's about it. It's not a franchise I ever thought I'd dive into, let alone one I wanted to. That is, until people started to talk about Arcane and how it is one of the best shows, if not the best show, on Netflix. Now, I've been burned by overhyped shows before, especially when it comes to Netflix. Not to mention that I've been trying to avoid giving Netflix any revenue after the recent transphobic history surrounding the company and the fact that they keep canceling shows after 2 seasons, but everybody just kept talking about how awesome it was. This reached its peak when people in my Discord server started talking nonstop about how fantastic Arcane truly was. And after Kyle joined the server and pledged $20 to my Patreon, I had no excuse left. So I sat down, started watching the show, and I loved it. Yeah, I'm gonna be completely transparent here. Arcane is a simply fantastic series and the best video game adaptation I've ever seen. In fact, let's jump the gun here completely and award the show its super stamp of approval right here and now. It's obvious to anyone who's seen the show, and even those who don't find it very gripping acknowledge its quality. My main focus for this analysis is not whether I would or wouldn't recommend this show to you, because I am, but more so asking why? Why is this the best video game series ever made? Why is it so good when other game adaptations have failed so miserably? Well, that's something I hope to address in this video. I should note that, in case it wasn't abundantly clear, I'm not going to be addressing too much League of Legends history or lore within this video, unless it's something that Philip thinks I should bring up. Although, even he's not a League fan, so think of this as mostly an explanation coming from a newcomer to the series. I do have an interest in diving into the lore with Phil at some point, and I may even check out some of those spin-off games in the future, like Ruined King and Convergence. But for this video, I'm purely coming into Arcane, seeing how good it is from a newbie's perspective. What I do know, however, is that Arcane was a 6-year passion project from co-creator Christian Link, one of Riot's long-standing composers, who's responsible for many character themes, including the famous Get Jinxed. In 2015, he came to Riot co-founders Mark Merrill and Brandon Beck with the idea of creating a League TV series, which was dismissed almost instantly given the cost that would go into it, and to a lesser extent, the stigma of video game adaptations, making the idea seem too risky. They did allow Christian and co-creator Alex Yee a few $1,000s to come up with concept material for the show to see how far they were willing to take it. This included a full minute-long test animation featuring the characters Vi and Jace, courtesy of French animation studio Fortiche, who had been responsible for many of League's music videos up until that point. The passion flowing through the entire team was hard to ignore, and through much reluctance, production on Arcane was finally underway. The production itself did not go without a few hiccups, but we can discuss all that as we proceed. What's important was that in 2021, the show was finally released onto Netflix, and, well, I'm sure you know the rest. So with all of that out of the way, get your tissues on standby, my buns. This is the world of Arcane.
Welcome to the lanes.
Arcane is a story set in the world of Runeterra, which was once home to many wielders of arcane magic. However, after a war between magic users laid waste to cities, a safe haven was created in the form of Piltover, the City of Progress. It is the shining beacon of hope for humanity and those without arcane power as they begin to focus on technological advancements in order to benefit all of mankind. And by mankind, I mean 95% humans and 5% everyone else, since there are a lot of strange and wondrous creatures in this world. However, all is not as well as it seems, as just across the river lies the ruins of the lanes. From what I can gather, the cities that were once on the surface have all been nearly destroyed by warfare, so the inhabitants have been driven underground into the trenches surrounding Piltover. The Undercity is filled with crime and corruption, as there is not much to go around, and those that steal come out on top. It is also filled with toxic air from the runoff of Piltover, and very little light is able to penetrate the lower levels. Many of the Undercity's citizens try to fight back and storm the bridge to get some help from Piltover, but time and time again, the topside's armed militia, known as the Enforcers, push them back underground with little effort. It is here where our story takes place, beginning with the massacre of many of the Undercity citizens at the hands of the Enforcers, including the parents of 2 kids named Vi and Powder. They witness firsthand the slaughter of their people, and Vander, who is leading the rebellion, lays down his weapons and brings the children back to safety. Several years go by, wherein Vi has become the leader of a band of teens and has learned to fight in the same style of Vander, who appears to be a boxer, although he uses cast iron gloves instead, which is always badass. Along with Powder, the band consists of Milo, who specializes in picking locks and running his mouth, Clagger, the muscle of the group, even if he's more reserved than the rest, and Echo, who is the youngest and works as an apprentice at an underground shop, where he gives the group tips on possible heists in the area, giving him the nickname Little Man. What really works about this cast is that we're introduced to them slowly and get a feel for their personalities. Despite the small episode number for the season, it never feels overwhelming, and you get the sense that this is just one small part of a larger world. In the second episode, we are introduced to Jace, who is a student at the University of Piltover whose life was saved long ago when he and his mother were transported with the use of magic. Ever since, he has looked to further his studies in the pursuit of harnessing the power this magic may provide and incorporating it into the technological world of Piltover. It is Jace's belief that bringing magic into their city is the next step in human progress that could help save many lives just as his once was. However, after an incident involving Vi and her gang, Jace's studies are found out and shunned by the university, as not only was it done via illegal means, but the study of magic goes against the very ethos of the city. Professor Heimerdinger, one of the members of Piltover's council, admires Jace's drive to change the world, but has seen too much destruction at the hands of rogue mages. In the wrong hands, magic can lay waste to entire civilizations, and in his 300 years of academic study, he has never been able to stabilize magic. Unfortunately, even after he forbids Jace from bringing magic up to the council during his trial, he gets protective over his dream and fights for its validity. Sadly, his pleas aren't heard, and he is sentenced to be expelled from the academy, with his research to be destroyed the very next day. This seems to put Jace in a near-suicidal state. However, before he is able to do anything too rash, he is stopped by Heimerdinger's apprentice, who is a man from the Undercity as well. He introduces himself as Victor, as he promises to help Jace achieve his goal and win the council over. As you may have guessed from just the first 2 episodes, there are a lot of characters introduced in just a short time. But I think the great strength of Arcane is how well everything is paced. Each episode runs approximately 40 minutes, giving us time to get accustomed to the world and characters being introduced, which is all handled so gradually that it never becomes overwhelming. The best comparison is episode 1 of Blood Blockade Battlefront. For as much as I love that show, that first episode can be very confusing on first watch, as it takes 25 minutes to establish 8 different characters, the world, the strangeness, and it's done so in a non-linear fashion. Arcane initially focuses on one group of characters and their perspective, as the building they steal from is Jace's research lab, and then it begins to intercut Vi and Powder's story with Jace as the secondary protagonist. In addition, Arcane is split into 3 distinct acts that run 3 episodes each. The first act focuses on introducing several of the main characters, while the second act flashes flashes forward several years as we see the effect these characters had on the world. We are then shown backstories for characters who are only given supporting roles initially, which allows them enough time for us to see their story unfold without making it feel as if we're cluttering too much in one go. It is simply masterful storytelling in that it has most of the major players introduced or foreshadowed in the beginning, but many of them aren't given the spotlight at first, so we don't realize how important of a role that they have to play until much later on. In fact, by the end of Act 2, Phil asked me who I thought was from the game and who was a character added for the series. While I got many of them correctly, there were still several surprises in the cast, including Vander, Singed, and Silco, who I got completely wrong. In any case, these characters are all fully fleshed out, which is important given that it is a very character-driven narrative. The interesting thing is that despite having lore behind its world, League of Legends doesn't have all that much of a story behind it, meaning that they didn't have too much to work off of when creating Arcane. In fact, during the first 2 years of development, it suffered major issues where the animation was fantastic, but there wasn't enough of a plot to make the show work. It got to the point where they had to sit Christian Link down and stage an intervention because what they had at the time looked pretty, but wasn't very good. They reluctantly went back to the drawing board, hired additional writers, and fleshed the story out even more. It almost cost them Fortitia's animation, but luckily, upon Christian's request, they were given more music videos to work on while the show's animation was shut down, which was fortunate for them since the music videos in question are currently sitting at 532 million views and 322 million views respectively. Like, holy shit.
Thank God Alex and I are shit at our jobs, because if we hadn't taken that extra time to develop the story, the KDA Popstars music video and the Rise music video would have never happened.
I really have to offer some major respect to Link and his team, because I've seen countless lazy adaptations of video games, and the fact that they scrapped 2 years worth of work and went completely back to basics, hired more writers, and focused more on quality really is impressive to me. Not many studios would have done that, especially when they can just make a quick cash grab from the initial profits alone. One of the major reasons why I think this story is so damn good is that they took the time to make it a fully fleshed out world, even as a character-driven narrative. They take the time to focus on major themes of poverty, class dynamics, the horrors of war, and what progress truly means. Every character, even if you don't agree with them, you completely grasp their line of reasoning. Heimerdinger has witnessed such devastation that he wants to take the time to make sure that it won't happen again. But Jace and Victor both know that the Undercity and the citizens therein can't wait that long. They want the people to benefit now instead of dying in vain. This is a conflict that continues throughout the series, with several characters wanting to make great change, but seeing their actions cause death, such as with Vander stopping his assault only because he sees that he has failed Vi and Powder by not protecting their parents during the fight. It's a fully layered narrative that touches upon so much without feeling preachy or confusing. It is just so brilliantly handled.
I'm a helpless little girl, and I set the building on fire. By accident. Totally by accident. Let's blow this city to ashes and see what Pow thinks. It's such pathetic neatness, but not for long, 'cause you'll
from this point onward, I will be discussing spoilers for the entirety of the show. So, if you haven't watched Arcane yet, I hope my words thus far have been enough to intrigue you on the series. As I said before, this is less of a review and more of an analysis on why this show is as good as it is. The first act of Arcane revolves around Victor and Jace discovering how to stabilize Hex Tech, but that mostly plays second fiddle to the main plot involving the introduction of the villain for this series. Silco used to be like a brother to Vander and aided in his rebellion against Piltover. But as tensions rose, Vi's parents were killed in the assault across the bridge. Believing himself responsible, Vander took Vi and Powder in as his surrogate children and raised them to be strong. However, this attachment caused him to become far more cautious in the eyes of the underground. People began to think of him as weak for refusing to fight back against the enforcers. In truth, he was doing this to spare his new charges, and even made a deal with the enforcers that they would stay out of Piltover business while the enforcers would leave them alone. This was the final straw for Silco, who fought with Vander in order to make him regain his fighting spirit, feeling betrayed by someone he viewed as a brother. After nearly drowning in the toxic waters of the Undercity, he managed to steal Vander's knife and escape, but not before his bruised and cut eye became infected by the polluted water, leaving him forever deformed. What's interesting is that while he does hate Vander for this incident, he isn't simply out for revenge, but instead wants freedom and respect. His dream is the independent nation of Zaun, with the same status and power as Piltover, no longer having to breathe in the noxious air of the Undercity or being looked down upon by the enforcers. And while he despises Vander, he never lost respect for him until he gave up the fight and made the deal with the enforcers. He sees this as a betrayal of their dream and sets out to kill Vander and take over the Undercity for himself in order to create Zaun. So, while Vi and her crew are dealing with the enforcers, Silco is using this to his advantage. He has a scientist by the name of Singed create a drug known as Shimmer, which turns ordinary people into hulking beasts. He also makes a deal with a corrupt enforcer named Marcus in order to lure out Vander and the kids before pulling a Darth Vader and altering the deal, killing the chief enforcer Grayson and Vander's best friend Benzo in the process. He kidnaps Vander and uses him as bait, leading to a massive fight between Vi and Silco's goons. Amidst the scuffle, Powder has snuck into the villain's lair as well against her sister's wishes. Having seen Benzo killed right in front of her, Vi wants to protect what remains of her family. But Powder just sees this as her being told that she's too weak to be of any help. She believes that these mysterious blue crystals that she stole from Jace's lab would be enough to prove her worth and save the day for her friends and family. Unfortunately, Powder has the worst luck in the entire series, and the explosion she causes not only barely phases Silco and his forces, but it also kills Milo and Clagger in the process and traps Vi under some rubble. Vander takes some Shimmer himself and tears apart the hulking beast that Silco had unleashed onto them before helping Vi escape from the burning building. Ultimately though, Vander ends up succumbing to his wounds. Milo and Clagger are still dead, and while one of Silco's thugs lost her arm, most of them are perfectly fine at the end of the scene. Powder shows up, excited that one of her bombs finally worked and that she could be of help. but Vi reveals that she killed their father and friends, sending her into a panic attack. Vi is understandably stricken by grief and momentarily leaves her sister behind, calling her a jinx and blaming her for everything going to hell. Left by herself in the rain, Powder is confronted by Silco, who asks where her sister has gone. Just as Vi herself comes to her senses, Marcus knocks her out and drags her away, as Powder angrily proclaims that Vi is not her sister anymore, with Silco embracing the broken child.
It's okay. I'll show them. We will show them all.
After this absolutely powerful end to Act 1, Act 2 flashes us forward several years as Jace has completely changed the face of Piltover with Hex Tech. With this new technology, he's able to teleport airships all around the world in just the blink of an eye, increasing trade commerce more than ever before. Because of this, Jace is hailed as the Man of Progress, and is asked to deliver the speech on Progress Day, along with showing off his latest invention. Professor Heimerdinger and his chief patron, Counselor Mel Medarda, both take a look at their new breakthrough, which the team has dubbed Hextech Gemstones. These gemstones completely stabilize the arcane crystals, allowing anyone to use them to power equipment for mining or other construction. However, Heimerdinger doesn't think that the world is ready for it just yet, and says that with a decade of testing, they can release it to the masses. The majority of this act focuses on Jace's rise to power within the council and Heimerdinger's fall from grace as he loses the confidence of the council, ending the arc with Jace and the other counselors voting Heimerdinger out. Meanwhile, Caitlyn, who is now a member of the Enforcers, tries to tackle a conspiracy in the Undercity, but is stopped at every turn by Marcus, who is now the new head of the Enforcers. Following a new lead, she heads to Piltover's prison Stillwater Hold, where she finds Vi having beat up her informant. Caitlyn releases Vi from prison so that the two of them can go on a mission to the Undercity to uncover who is behind all the illegal activity getting past the Hextech gates. Along the way, they discover that Silco, in a dark reflection of Jace, has risen to power in the lanes, leading the differing crime districts with other crime bosses underneath him. They also learn of someone named Jinx, who is Silco's right hand and handles all of his dirty business. Jinx, as it turns out, is a grown-up Powder who is now working directly under Silco as his surrogate daughter. She has finally mastered her bombcraft and is now seriously terrifying in combat, looming in the shadows and taking out enemies, not leaving anything or anyone behind besides her numerous calling cards. At the same time, she appears to be suffering from severe PTSD as she sees illusions of her dead friends everywhere and even fires on her own teammates. Act 2 ends with Jinx discovering that Vi is still alive and the two reuniting, only for a rebel group called the Firelights to swoop in, knock Vi and Caitlyn out, and take them back to their base. The leader of this group turns out to be none other than a grown-up Echo who is fighting back against Silco's army, including Jinx, who he believes is too far gone to ever be saved. This leaves Vi with a difficult dilemma. Will she be able to reawaken her sister, or has she fully succumbed to the persona of Jinx? Act 3, in turn, serves as the climax of the season, with everything coming to a head in a big way. There are battles between our heroes and Silco's crew, hard truths that everyone has to face and an insane finale that leads to a cliffhanger for the series. These are some of the best episodes of the show, featuring some of the coolest battles, such as Echo vs. Jinx, which is told in such a unique way and foreshadows future events. It's where the harshest lessons are told, such as when Jace accidentally kills a child who is working at a shimmer plant when he and Vi storm the place together. And he has to come to the realization that taking down Silco could result in more innocent people dying. It's also where we get the biggest character moments, such as the final dinner scene with Vi, Jinx, and Silco. Obviously, at this point, you know that I absolutely adore this story, and I honestly think that the 3-act structure is a huge help in that regard. We have an act setting up the major players, an act setting up their rise to power and how the past events have shaped them over time, and then a climax where everything hits the fan and we get some gloriously animated fight scenes that feel more like music videos than anything else. They truly allow enough time in each episode to focus on multiple different characters, and as time goes on, the roster grows to make for a chaotic and suspenseful conclusion to the entire season. There are around 10 or so major characters, but Act 1 is mainly about the pairs of Vi and Powder and Jace and Victor. Act 2 brings Heimerdinger and Caitlyn up into prominent roles, along with several others specifically designed for Arcane, such as Savika and Mel, which leaves Act 3 with a full roster. Each new episode starts with some more backstory on someone we never would have expected, such as when we learn about Victor's backstory and his connection to Singed, who survives the fire in Act 1, which is something that I didn't see coming. In the same way, we learn more about Mel in the episode where her mother arrives, and we see what other nations are like compared to Piltover. Every episode adds more and more layers to the people we already know and ups the stakes so that by the end of Act 3, we care when Jinx takes the Hextech gemstone and uses it to turn her weapon into a freaking rocket launcher with a shark for a head as she unleashes it upon the council building, where Jace, Victor, and the rest of the council are unanimously voting for peace with Zaun. It is just a supremely well-crafted story where every story beat matters, and cutting any scene would detract from the tale that they're trying to tell. Another major strength is the writing, which is not only incredibly quotable, but insanely memorable. When Silco is first introduced, we see him with his infected eye as he keeps having to use a device to stave off the infection. He talks to one of his pawns and gestures to the sea creatures around him.
Beautiful, aren't they? Yet, up there, on the surface, no one even knows they exist.
They're monsters.
There's a monster inside all of us.
This is just such a perfectly scripted exchange as we see the kind of person Silco is and how he operates. There are so many quotes in just the first act alone that I held with me long afterwards. Vi saying, "What makes you different makes you strong." Marcus saying, "You're just a small man in a little hole the world forgot to bury." Or Victor saying, "When you're going to change the world,
Don't ask for permission.
After having seen Bridging the Rift, which is the recently released behind-the-scenes documentary, I have to give major praise to the writers and staff that they hired for the project after the intervention. This includes Monica Macer, who mentored the crew on show running, Melinda Dilger, who was hired as head of production, and Amanda Overton, who is one of the major writers of the script and who created some of the most important lines, such as the final line that Jinx says to Vi. She helped tremendously in strengthening the core relationship between these two sisters, and it leads to line after line of one of the most believable yet tragic tales of a family that I have ever seen. This team helped majorly fine-tune the essence of this story into something truly magnificent while keeping true to Christian's vision. That being said, it is still very clear that Christian Link was the major heart of this production. After he told Fortiche that they needed to shut down animation of Arcane, the video they showed of him was truly depressing. He felt as if he failed Fortiche and everyone else who had worked hard to make this dream a reality. They didn't want to create some drop-in-the-bucket cash grab. They truly wanted to capture the essence of the game, expand upon the lore, and create something truly memorable. It may have been a rocky road to get there, but despite being told that the idea was way out of their reach and that it would not work, they managed to pull it off and make a story unlike any other.
When you're going to change the world, don't ask for permission.
Honestly, the only minor issue I ended up taking with the story was the death of Victor's assistant, who walks in during a Hextech experiment and is vaporized in the process. On the one hand, it kind of feels like a fridging, as they set her up as someone who knew Victor as a child and was inspired by him, only for her to die for his development. But on the other hand, they barely set her up during the show, and I think it works for Victor's character arc in a big way, which I'll discuss more when I talk about Victor in a bit. With that said, I think Arcane's story is otherwise phenomenal and had me on the edge of my seat each episode, yelling at my TV screen again and again. This is more than just a simple adaptation, but a labor of love from many talented people, and I think that, based on the plot alone, it is absolutely superb. With that being said, I think it's time to delve into these characters because they tie so wholly into this plot that they nearly overtake it. Much in the same vein as Blood Blockade Battlefront, this is a very character-oriented story, and it's hard to discuss one without discussing the other. Even then, there's just so much to go over with each individual character that I can't possibly go over all of it in this video. That's why, if you want a more thorough analysis of some of the themes that are brought up through the characters, you should look forward to our series, Flipped Perspective, for Philip's take on the series, and... wait, I didn't script this. Why is this here? Honestly, I think the best place to start is with Vander and Silco, since their characters are a stepping stone for the plot to kick off. As I stated before, Vander is the leader of the underground, having built it from the ground up, with Silco being like a brother to him, sharing in the dream of the independent nation of Zaun. Where they differ is in their convictions. Vander was driven solely by anger at Piltover. It is this anger that led him to rally the people of the lanes in their assault on the bridge against the enforcers. What you see in that opening sequence in Act 1 is a direct result of his anger and bravado, as we see him throw down his gauntlets when he witnesses the consequences of his actions, as everyone except Vi, Powder, and himself is killed. Now, instead of anger, he is driven by guilt, and it shows in everything he says to Vi. He wants Vi to be strong enough to lead her crew, but he also keeps hammering home that everything that happens falls upon her. After she continues to grow more angry and aggressive, Vander brings her to the memorial by the bridge to explain what this means. She just sees death as a reason to fight, but he points to it and asks what she's willing to lose. What Vander is saying is that people will die going down this path, and she has to live with that. If she truly wants to fight back, it will cost her more than she realizes, as Vander has seen firsthand, and by the end of the arc, she truly understands, as Vander, Milo, Clagger, and Benzo are killed because of her actions in the beginning of the act. Vander is a powerful character because you can see the regret in every single one of his actions, and he doesn't hesitate to sacrifice himself time and again for the people of the lanes. He refuses to give anyone up because their deaths weigh upon him, and until his last fight, he risks his life to save those he can. On the other side of the coin, we have Silco, a man who is so singularly driven by his goal that he's willing to sacrifice everything to obtain it. He feels betrayed by Vander for abandoning the cause and being so willing to give away their freedom that he would side with the enforcers. Vander is a man changed by guilt, whereas Silco used his deformity and betrayal as fuel to further motivate him, willing to sacrifice anyone in order to achieve his goal. He doesn't bat an eye when he sees what Shimmer does to a rat, and immediately says to test it out on one of his goons who had proved insubordinate. To him, the loss of life and outcome of Shimmer is meaningless next to his goals. After Vi leaves Powder alone with Vander's dead body, Silco approaches her with a bloody knife in hand. The same knife that he used to stab Vander twice just moments ago. He sees the sobbing Powder and places the knife behind his back, almost as if he is about to stab her, calling out to her and asking her where her sister is. This is one of the most raw scenes to me, because as rain starts to pour and the remnants of Silco's crew emerge from the fire, it looks as if Powder is going to die. However, when Powder rushes into Silco's arms, hugs him, and says that Vi had left her, Silco's attitude completely changes. He sees himself in the young Powder, betrayed by a family member, and slowly moves his hand not to stab her, but instead embrace her slowly in a genuine hug. This scene humanizes Silco and informs us that while he may be supremely ruthless, he has understandable motivations and reasons for being the way he is. He's certainly not a good person, and we see that in the way he gaslights Jinx as a teen, but he certainly has far more layers than the typical black and white bad guy. Jinx, in many ways, is his daughter, and it has a very similar effect that Vi had on Vander. While Silco is just as bad as before, he takes special care of Jinx, never reprimanding her and treating her differently from the rest of his crew. The other mob bosses take note of this, telling him that Jinx is a problem and that she has made him soft. It's at this point of his life that he finally starts to understand what happened to Vander all those years ago. There's another brilliant scene near the end of the series where he's offered his nation of Zaun by Jace, but only if he gives up Jinx in return. He ends up drunk in front of Vander's statue, saying that he now has everything he ever wanted, but he just can't bring himself to give up Jinx. These scenes serve not only to drive the plot forward, but to show us the kind of person Silco really is. He has been so single-mindedly chasing his dream that he didn't realize what he might eventually have to sacrifice in order to obtain it. He's one of the best damn characters of the show, and the funny part is that both him and Vander weren't even champions from the game. They were created solely for Arcane, showing the true talents of this show's team. This isn't licensed media limbo, it's passion project perfection. This team really cared for the project they worked on, and it absolutely shows. Some may have been disappointed to see the voice cast for the game absent in Arcane, as every character received new voice actors, but seeing as I haven't played the game much myself, I'm fine with it personally. Vander is voiced by JB Blanc, who you may recognize for his role as Ulthane in Darksiders and Ryotaro Dojima in Persona 4, The Animation. He has a tendency to voice gruff characters in animation and video games, and this is no different. Here he offers a thick British accent as Vander, and I fell in love with his performance. He made me cry numerous different times, and thus far, there hasn't been a role I haven't loved from him. Silco is voiced by Jason Spizak, who played Scorpion in the 2018 Spider-Man video game, and the Penguin in the Telltale Batman series. He has a tendency to play smooth-talking villains, and while I love some of his previous performances, Silco is currently my favorite. There are just so many layers to his delivery, where it isn't just pure menace or cold and calculating, but he also adds an underlining earnestness to everything he's saying. There's a ton of humanity in the performance, and so much of that is because of the voice that Spizak gives him. Next up, let's take a look at Jace Tallis, who is presented as a foil to Silco despite only meeting him in one scene. Much like Silco, Jace is singularly driven for his dream of Hextech to help save lives, and in order to do that, he makes decisions that aren't always for the best. For instance, he used illegal research equipment from the Undercity without informing the Academy, but he made that choice in order to make Hextech a reality. A large portion of Jace's arc for this season is coming to terms with the harsh reality of Piltover. In order to achieve success, he has to make sacrifices, which becomes a major theme throughout the series. Victor saves Jace from near suicide after all of his patrons had disowned him, becoming his partner to make Hextech a reality. However, in order to prove that magic can be stabilized through technology, they have to break all the rules, sneaking into Heimerdinger's lab to retrieve Jace's equipment and prove the council wrong. And it's through this rule breaking that they're able to succeed at their goal and impress upon Counselor Medarda and Heimerdinger the beauty of Hextech. The two continue to work on Hextech in order to benefit the people of Piltover, but Heimerdinger continually tells them that they need time to work out all the kinks. Because of Mel's suggestion, Jace is taken off Hextech research and elevated to the position of counselor, but it's clear that he is overwhelmed by all of this. He doesn't want to be in a position of power, but to instead improve Hextech for the benefit of others. But instead, he finds himself making difficult decisions for the safety of Piltover, even when it goes against his morality. He resents his decision to vote Heimerdinger out of the council, but he trusts Mel because she believed in him every step of the way when nobody else would. He can't afford to wait forever because humans have such short lifespans, and so he's forced to cater to the council and make exceptions for the heads so that he can fulfill his dream. When he discovers that Silco is behind everything, the council refuses to take action, so he utilizes his Hextech gemstones to power up his hammer and rushes in with enforcers and Vi in order to stop the Shimmer production. They succeed at first, but he accidentally kills a child worker in the process and decides to put down his weapon lest anyone else get hurt from his pursuits. The thing I really appreciate about Jace is how he approaches his dream. He very much could have been like Silco, and he does things he's not proud of in order to reach his goals, but he does so for noble reasons and tries to make the right choices for those around him. He's not selfish, and I think that's the important thing about his character. Jace is under a selfless pursuit to benefit others in need and save them like he himself was saved. However, it has led him down a similar path as Silco, with him having to climb the social ladder through any means necessary in order to reach that goal. In the end, he isn't able to help those he wanted to save, and that weighs on him heavily, so he makes a deal with a villain in order to sustain peace. He brokers a deal with Silco without the council's knowledge, where Silco has to give up Jinx for him to get his nation of Zaun. It's such an interesting character arc, and even if he isn't sure if he's doing the right thing, he keeps trying for the sake of others, even when his own biases get the best of him. Victor, on the other hand, is an underdog character that I absolutely adore. He is a poor cripple from the Undercity who had nothing except his intelligence, and that has set him on his current path. As a kid, he was acquainted with Sky, who later became his research assistant, and Singed, who used to work for Heimerdinger. He formed a strong friendship with Singed, helping him with his experiments until he was scared away by the alarming nature of what they were doing to one of the creatures of the Undercity. Victor works his way up to Heimerdinger's assistant, but is willing to throw it all away to help Jace with Hextech and his dream to help the world. He is a selfless character who I loved from Act 1 alone, but then it's revealed that Victor is dying from the effects of the toxic fumes of the Undercity. Years of living near the runoff have poisoned him, and there appears to be no cure. Victor returns to the Undercity to ask Singed for help with his condition, finally realizing what his experiments were for all those years ago, to help prolong life under the harsh conditions of the lanes. With the help of Singed, he manages to augment his leg to the point where he can not only walk, but actually run as well. Emboldened by this, he prepares to do it to the rest of his body, but Sky walks in on the experiment and is turned to dust as a result. While I do have reservations when it comes to Sky's death, I have to admit, I really did adore Victor's arc. Victor had nothing his entire life and just wanted to leave his mark on the world, but ended up finding out that he was dying. He kept trying to help Jace pursue his dreams, but every time they came up with a breakthrough, Heimerdinger kept telling them it was too dangerous. So Victor chose alternative methods to prolong his life, enough to make their dreams a reality, leading to Sky's death. The idea that his time is quickly running out gives so much urgency to Jace's actions and shows why Victor would go to such extremes. He's a good person trapped in a terrible situation, and the more he tries to help, the worse it seems to get. Victor is a lot like Jace in many ways. They want to change the world through any means possible, but they lose sight along the way and cause harm as a result. I adore Victor as a character, and I'm interested to see if they'll take him down the path of villainy for Season 2, given how he is in the game. All I hope for is his survival, and that he continues to try to do good, if only because he's one of my favorite characters in the show. Voice-wise, Jace is played by Kevin Alejandro, who is known for his roles as Brother Blood in Arrow and Officer Dan Pruitt in Grey's Anatomy. I haven't seen him in his other roles, but he kills it as Jace, bringing across the moral dilemmas and hesitancy in everything he does. Victor, meanwhile, is voiced by Harry Lloyd, and I adore the thick Russian accent that Lloyd gives to Victor, and I feel he really brings out the joy of this character in the face of death. Victor is truly fascinating to me as a parallel to Jace, but he always seems to remain joyous no matter what happens, and I think Lloyd does a great job bringing that across. They are just a great pair together, and I love their chemistry.
Oh dear, what a shame.
Come on, Duke, let's go do those crimes.
Yeah, let's go get sushi and not pay.
If Victor's arc is about not having enough time to achieve greatness, Echo is the exact opposite, because his arc is all about living in the moment. Echo is the remaining survivor from Vi's crew during the Silco incident, and he watches as Silco takes over Vander's bar and eventually the lanes. He sees Powder slowly turn into Jinx in real time, and with nobody else to turn to, he forms his own crew known as the Firelights. They've set up base at a tree growing deep underground, helping citizens fight back against Silco's gang, get cured of their addiction to Shimmer, and find a new life together. They called themselves the Firelights after the fireflies they found underground that helped light up their new home, and they used their time to create hoverboards to get the drop on Silco and his men. Heimerdinger is perplexed at the hazardous nature of their technology, but for Echo, the danger is no barrier for living.
It's not enough to give people what they need to survive. You have to give them what they need to live.
This is the perfect way to describe Echo, because while it is true he is weighed down by all that he's lost, he is still living very much in the moment. There is a mural in their base of all their fallen comrades, including Powder, but they are finally happy here because they are actually free. I think the key aspect of Echo is that he has dealt with loss throughout his life, but he continues to fight because he has seen this glimpse of freedom. He has seen happiness and is willing to fight for it. He is loving every single second with his hoverboard and crew of happy rebels, but when push comes to shove, he will turn time into his weapon. I simply love it. There's also the brilliant Jinx versus Echo fight, where he starts by swinging his watch, and it transitions to a young Echo fighting a young Powder in practice. He hits the stopwatch, and it rewinds back to the present, where Echo dodges the bullet this time around, and takes down Jinx. Again, Echo is all about making every moment count, and I love how they showcase that in his brief appearance in Act 3. Also, I love his style. His fashion and hairstyle and overall confidence and presence are all simply wonderful. Echo is voiced by Miles Brown as a child, and Reed Shannon after the time skip. Miles Brown appears to be a relatively new voice actor, with this show being his largest role to date. I think he has a great energy to him, being very excitable, but also able to pull off the tough scenes of Benzo's death. As for Reed Shannon, he gives a very stark contrast to young Echo and does a great job building up the character from the broken kid to cocky and confident adult. However, he shows the layers that Echo has when he talks to Vi, and I am looking forward to seeing more of him in Season 2 because he has quickly become one of my favorite characters. Meanwhile, Heimerdinger is the inverse of Echo due to the long lifespan of his people. By the second act of the show, Heimerdinger is around 314 years old, and he shows no signs of slowing down, which is the crux of his character. He grew up during the War of the Arcane and saw firsthand the destruction of entire cities and recognizes the Hextech Cube as the catalyst of destruction. Because of this, he is incredibly cautious and patient, focusing on progress, yes, but only once the technology is safe for everyone to use. He believes that he's doing a service for the people by holding progress back like this, but once he's voted out of the council, he puts on an Organization 13 cloak and travels to the Undercity to see if Jace is right.
Say, fellas, did somebody mention the door to darkness?
Down there, he sees the horrors of the Undercity firsthand, with golem-esque creatures begging for Shimmer, thugs holding people up in alleys, and those he tries to help are warned away from him by their parents. He realizes that there are problems in the Undercity that need solving now, and he isn't welcome there because he's from Piltover. Luckily, however, he finds a wounded Echo and helps him back to his base, where he's astounded by all that he has built in just a few years. Heimerdinger is interesting to me because I can see exactly where he's coming from. It is very important to prevent weapons of destruction from entering the wrong hands, and Jace's Hextech gemstone is so easy to use that Jinx managed to figure it out and use it against them. At the same time, what he should have been focusing on was seeing what Hextech could do now for the people of the Undercity. At no point do they talk about the idea of Hextech to give widespread medicine to the people, improving the toxic air and water, or widespread food for the needy. This seems to be the direction he's going in at the end of Act 3, and I think this is the right direction for his character. he was blinded by his position and thought he was doing good, but nothing actually came from his delay tactics as people continued to suffer below. Heimerdinger is voiced by Mick Wingert, who is known for his numerous roles in television, such as Tony Stark in just about every television appearance for the past 5 years. I unfortunately haven't seen any of the shows he's been in, but I think he does a wonderful job as Heimerdinger, playing up the cartoony nature of his species, but really hammering home the serious moments in the show. I feel like he's not in enough of the show for me to make a full analysis on his voice acting, but he is enjoyable, and I am looking forward to seeing more of him in the future. Meanwhile, I feel Mel complements Heimerdinger in many ways while going in a different direction. The professor is clearly cautious and altruistic, but from the start, I wasn't quite sure how to feel about Medarda. She is initially presented as calculating and manipulative, using Jace to further her own ends and looking down on the council as buffoons. She spends a lot of the second act in this limbo state where I wasn't sure if she was helping Jace in order to further her own career or if she genuinely loved him. She appears to be using him, especially when she instructs him to make deals with the council to conduct illegal trade against his own morality, but when they kiss and have
passionate fornication,
I wasn't entirely sure. However, we soon discover her backstory, where we see that Mel was born the youngest child of a monarchy in Noxus. As a child, she believed that diplomacy and mercy were better options than killing their enemies, but her mother Ambessa was convinced that this would make their nation look weak. She banished Mel to Piltover in order to stop her from growing soft, but she shows up again during Act 3, where she asks Mel to help her win another war after her brother had been killed in another fight. Mel ends up rejecting the offer and siding with diplomacy and peace in the end, cluing us into her character. She is a kind-hearted person, born into a nation of war, and was spurned by her own family. In Piltover, she continues to work towards her original goals, but it's extremely clear from the beginning that she isn't above using others because of the way she was just tossed aside. Much like Heimerdinger, she does have principles and is trying to help the city, but she also has something to prove to her family, and it comes to a head in the final act. I think what makes Mel so interesting is just how ambiguous she is for a large portion of the show. I didn't like her in Act 2. However, she is far more complex than I initially thought, serving as a complement to Jason Heimerdinger while also opposing their morality in many ways. She wants to do great things and wants to do it without bloodshed, which is admirable, but still does illegal things in order to get her way. She goes behind everyone's backs in order to create her peace. She absolutely hates the council and views them as children, but sees a kindred spirit in Jace and legitimately falls in love with him. I also find it fascinating that Ambessa and the rest of her crew are thick as all hell, while Mel is very skinny, adding to the disdain that she has for her daughter. Mel is voiced by Tox Olagundoye, who you may know as Mrs. Beakley in DuckTales 2017, or Krang 2 in the Rise of the TMNT movie. She is really good at voicing sophisticated sounding characters, but also brings a humanity to them that I just love. She has an undeniable presence to her voice that commands your attention, but a sincerity that shines in every role she's in. let's just hope that she doesn't turn out to be dead in season 2. Moving on, Caitlyn is another character who I misjudged from the beginning and ends up somewhat morally gray throughout the show, although she ends up leaning in a different direction. The start of the show paints Caitlyn as a rebel, since she helps Jace with his illegal research and helps him get parts from the Undercity as well. She even ends the act by being his only remaining supporter, saying that she's a misfit too. However, in the second act, we see that she's joined the Enforcers, which is not what I was expecting for her arc. At the same time, her nature hasn't fully changed as she goes against the grain, especially after Marcus takes her off the case. Now that Marcus is head of the Enforcers, he is constantly trying to cover up evidence that he is still working with Silco, but Kate goes against him to uncover the conspiracy that is happening under their noses. She breaks the rules in order to find out the truth, which is such a different twist to me, especially when we learn that she knew Grayson when she was younger and takes a lot after her as a result. In the game, Caitlyn is known as the Sheriff of Piltover, a title that Grayson and Marcus both hold, so it seems that's the direction she's heading in. Although, she also appears to be going in a different path as well, taking a route that is best for the Undercity and Piltover as a whole, rather than the uneasy peace of Grayson and the corruption of Marcus. She wants to benefit the poor and uses her status to do that. She frees Vi from prison, and the two journey to the lanes in order to bring Silco to justice. While she and Vi butt heads at first, there is a huge sense of camaraderie between them from the start, and a large amount of chemistry, considering Caitlyn has been confirmed queer by Amanda. It would make sense for her to be an outcast in the big city, given her sexual orientation, and I think her budding romance with Vi is also a part of this. While Amanda has stated that they don't have labels like lesbian or bisexual in Piltover, we don't see many other queer couples outside of the lanes, adding to the major disparity between the two classes. Caitlyn does her best to see the good in everyone and fights corruption within the system, but the system is built against her, much in the same way that gay and trans people have to keep fighting to be accepted and are labeled as deviants in our current society. So she takes a different path, being herself and using what status she has in order to help the downtrodden, and that allows her to benefit both sides. Young Caitlyn is voiced by Molly Harris and by Katie Lung in the present. Molly appears to be a relatively new actor. Still, she does a great job showing the many sides of Caitlyn as a child. Katie Lung is probably most known for her role as Cho Chang in the Harry Potter franchise, but I honestly think that Caitlyn is her best role. She has a more commanding air about her as an adult, but still keeps the rebellion of her youth, and that dichotomy is hard to pull off, but Katie does it. She grew to be one of my favorite characters by the second half of the show, and I was on the edge of my seat during the dinner scene, wondering what had happened to her. I need more Caitlyn in season 2, and that's mostly because of Katie's performance.
I thought maybe you could love me like you used to. Even though I'm different. But you changed too. So, here's to the new us.
Okay, now we come to the most important characters of the show, Vi and Jinx. These two are the heart and soul of Arcane, because while the rest of the characters shape how this story evolves, the show truly hinges on Vi and Jinx. If they hadn't attempted the Piltover heist, and Powder hadn't dropped the arcane crystal, this entire plot wouldn't exist. A large part of this falls under Vi and her insistence on doing this specific heist. She called the shots, brought the crew there, and put them all in danger. She could have pulled any heist or any job around the Undercity, but her growing anger and hatred of enforcers and the upper class put them all in danger and ended up getting Vander killed. The 3 acts of Arcane serve many purposes for the characters, but when it comes to Vi, these acts have a very specific point to them. Act 1 is about anger and mistakes. Act 2 is about guilt and sadness. And the final act is about redemption, acceptance, and moving forward. In many ways, Vi's arc falls in line with the 5 stages of grief. She has gone through the initial denial when she sees Vander beating up the people who killed her parents. The anger springs up within her very quickly and is the catalyst for most of her actions in the first act. She wants revenge for what happened to her and is constantly asking Vander to fight back for the lanes like he used to. The big turning point for her, though, is when Vander takes her to the memorial for her family. She vents all of her frustrations at not being able to act. She understands that she's responsible for her crew, but she still wants to lash out and fight and to do something with these pent-up feelings. And it takes Vander's speech to pull her back from the brink. If she keeps going down this path, her friends will eventually be sacrificed for her anger. And that's exactly what happens when Vi contacts Grayson. Act 2 then revolves entirely around her guilt at the choices she made in the past. Every choice misunderstood the harsh reality of the world and led to destruction. She blames herself for leaving Powder behind when she discovered that she killed Milo and Clagger, and her years in prison have only strengthened that feeling of guilt. When Caitlin springs her from prison, she reacts not with anger, but with snark, sarcasm, and self-loathing. She makes jokes to avoid her own guilt and depression, but is continuously bargaining to save her sister at the cost of her own safety. Finally, Act 3 is all about acceptance. With help from Caitlin and Echo, she has to accept that Powder is fully Jinx now and is beyond redemption, but Vi is not. Vi has to forgive herself and become the person that Vander always knew she could be. She has to move on from the death of Powder and accept that Jinx is all that remains. With many of the other characters, the entire focus is on saving everyone around them, but Vi differs in that she focuses solely on Powder, only for that goal to fail as well. She comes to the realization that casualties happen in war, and that in order to move forward, some things have to be sacrificed for the greater good. When Jay stops fighting Silco because of the death of a child, she treats it as unfortunate but necessary. She knows that worse things can happen in this fight, and she is finally willing and able to make those sacrifices in order to finally see peace. What I love about Vi is that while she has been hardened by all that she's been through, she is still a good person at heart. While she is skeptical when it comes to Caitlin at First, the big thing I noticed is that she never confronts Caitlyn in anger for Piltover's crimes. She definitely brings them up, but she doesn't blame Caitlyn or take her vengeance out on her. She only ever gets angry when those from Piltover refuse to change or open their eyes to the true danger, as seen with her confrontation with the Council. Even so, she puts her trust in Caitlyn throughout the second half of the show, confiding in her and trusting her to fight for the Undercity in her own way. Vi is a complex character, forced into a horrible situation, and I adored her both because I can identify with her struggles and because I can see the ways in which she is slowly healing and trying to better herself. Vi is voiced by Haley Steinfeld, who's had a long and illustrious career in both voice acting and live action. She played Gwen in the masterpiece that is Into the Spider-Verse.
I'm Gwanda.
Wait, your name is Gwanda?
She was Charlie Watson in Bumblebee, and she's joined the MCU as Kate Bishop in Hawkeye. Haley just has this wonderful energy about her, where she can portray these youthful characters and showcase their drive and angst and passion, but she is really damn good at showing their humanity more than anything else. Many times during Arcane, she made me cry based on her performance because you can entirely see where she's coming from and the motive behind her decisions from the acting alone. Alright, now it is time to discuss Jinx. Powder is such an interesting character to me because of how she contrasts to Jinx. Powder saw her parents die at a very young age, which is the basis for her PTSD. She is constantly afraid to fight others and is shown running away or paralyzed when it comes time to take action. Vi tries to push her forward and tell her that she's ready for this, which helps calm her down in the short term, but it's clear that she has deep-seated trauma holding her back. My friend Eliza also pointed out to me that she may even be on the spectrum because of an early scene where she freaks out and insulates early on. She feels useless, and Vi isn't enough to drive away the self-doubt that she has. We can clearly see that she is an amazing shot with a pistol, but that's only in a practice environment, and she ends up in danger when enforcers come after them and she needs to be saved. The big blow to her psyche happens when Vander is kidnapped and the crew head over to rescue him. Even Vi tells her to stay behind, which is taken by Powder as a sign that the group has abandoned her. This feeling quells as she realizes that the crystals she stole from Jace are explosive, which leads her to making a new bomb and rushing to save Vi and the others. Except, she only made things worse in the end. Vi blames her in her grief and leaves her, allowing a far greater evil to take her in. In this moment, Powder dies before our eyes as Jinx fully takes over. The important thing to discuss when talking about Jinx is that she is still the same person as before, as this doesn't appear to be a case of dissociative identity disorder. She may act differently after the first act, but she only answers to Jinx because that is what Silco has christened her as. He has gaslit her into believing that he is essentially her father figure, and after later events has her symbolically reborn as Jinx so that she can move past her trauma. When I looked online for some help regarding her mental condition, most sources pointed to Jinx suffering from trauma-induced schizophrenia and borderline personality disorder. While dissociative identity disorder involves the creation of several different personalities that are all distinct from one another, schizophrenia is something completely different. It simply means that the person interprets reality abnormally, often resulting in hallucinations, delusions, and disordered thinking. It can be associated with DID, but they aren't the same thing. This is why titles such as Danganronpa, insinuating that DID is the same as schizophrenia, complete with a derogatory version of the term, is very iffy to me. Borderline personality disorder can often be confused for DID as well, since it involves rapid changes in self-identity or self-image. However, it is more commonly associated with intense fear of abandonment, self-harm, wild mood swings, impulsive and risky behavior, and intense anger. I do want to be clear here that I do not suffer from any of these mental disorders, but I did run this by several friends who do, and they stated that Jinx felt more in line with schizophrenia and BPD from their experiences. This is further supported by Jinx's trauma-induced hallucinations that include Milo and Clagger appearing from beyond the grave, something that my friends say is common in both cases. I apologize if I get something slightly wrong. While I tried to run it by people with these conditions, I do not experience these symptoms myself, and therefore do not have enough knowledge to fully comment on Jinx's condition. With that being said, Jinx might just be my favorite character in the show. From the beginning of Act 2, Jinx is shrouded in secrecy, appearing from the darkness like a ghost. She completely kicks everyone's ass, only stopping when she sees a girl who reminds her of Vi, triggering a hallucination that she tries to destroy with her chain gun. This introduction gives us a wonderful view into who Jinx is. She has been molded and taught by Silco to the point where she is legitimately terrifying and makes bombs that will blow your head clean off, but she's haunted by the past, which trips her up. I knew I loved Jinx from the moment she appeared in Act 2, but seeing her in her element, creating weapons and jamming out to her own theme song made me fall in love with her. We're allowed to see a deeper look into her psyche here as she's desperate for people to tell her she's done good. Her mood swings are not just in line with BPD, but also with how she reacts to everything. She feels constantly hounded by the ghosts of the past, and any validation is good in her eyes, so she takes insane risks in order to keep Silco's love. However, this changes when she finds out that Vi is still alive. She hesitantly seeks out the truth, not sure if she can truly be Jinx if Vi is still alive. But they finally reunite and embrace each other once more after Silco's failed attempts to intercept Vi. There's just one problem though.
I quickly became homophobic. Hating on gay people became part of my lifestyle.
Jinx begins to hallucinate that Caitlyn is taking her sister away, fueled by Caitlyn's status as an enforcer, making it odd to her why Vi wouldn't hate her. Jinx's worries of Vi and Caitlyn's budding relationship keep growing, and after suffering her near-death experience, Jinx kidnaps the two of them while Silco is pouring his heart out to the Vander statue. Overhearing his confession to Vander's death, she kidnaps him as well. For the longest time, you just see Silco and Vi tied up along with effigies of Milo and Clagger, and you start thinking the worst as Jinx brings food to the table on a silver platter.
Sheesh,
I'm not that crazy.
Before she took the lid off of it, I was fully prepared to see Caitlyn's head underneath. But as fans of the game were probably aware, she wasn't going down like that. But the whole point was that she thought Vi could love her like before. Yet, both the audience and Vi assumed the worst of her in this moment. She tells Vi to make a choice. Either Caitlyn dies and she returns to being Powder once more, or Vi does nothing and she continues being Jinx. Refusing to kill Caitlyn, Vi promises to go far away where it can just be her and Powder, only to be interrupted by Silco, who tells Jinx that the topside can all rot. She is who Silco is truly loyal to. Amidst the argument, Caitlyn manages to free herself and steals the chain gun, leading to a wild showdown wherein Jinx knocks her down and takes the gun back, all while the voices in her head keep her confused. The scuffle ends as Silco grabs the pistol in front of him, leading to Powder instinctively killing him in order to save Vi. This is such a brilliant scene in many respects. Jinx offering Vi the choice, the fact that Silco loves her above all else and is willing to throw away everything for her, the way everyone has lied to her so she doesn't know who to trust. However, the fact that she kills Silco in order to save Vi is the icing on the cake, as she has now killed another father figure due to her trauma, just like Vander before. In the end, Silco had no regrets and didn't chastise or blame her for any of this. He wasn't exactly a good father, but he loved her and reassured that love, which is what Jinx needed the most. It's in this moment where she realizes that she can never be Powder anymore now that she has allowed this to happen again. She can see that Vi can no longer love her like she used to. She tells her that they've both changed and that this is who she is now. Jinx is such a powerful and complex character, haunted by the choices she made, her inability to help her friends, and her past failures. She constantly tries to do better, but her inability to do so only causes her to continue to change for the worse. Jinx has changed, but so has Vi, and they are no longer compatible. She chooses to be Jinx, because as much as she wants to return to the past, she knows now it's not possible. Jinx is one of my favorite characters in all of media, and the more layers I peel back, the more I understand and relate to her just because of how well written a character she is. Powder is voiced by Mia Sinclair Jeunesse, and Jinx is voiced by Ella Purnell, giving distinct voices to each character. Mia is a relatively new actress, notable for her roles in musicals, but this appears to be her largest role outside of theater. She does a wonderful job as Powder, and the scene in episode 3 where she is breaking down and sobbing is simply amazing due to her acting. Ella Purnell, on the other hand, has starred in quite a few roles, including Dulce in Kick-Ass 2 and Gwyn in Star Trek Prodigy. I admittedly haven't seen any of those roles, but she absolutely nails it as Jinx. A large portion of what makes Jinx work is the animation and lighting, but her strained voice, inflection, and genuine heartfelt pathos is all thanks to Purnell. She's so damn good. As for the remaining characters, there's really not too many worth noting that I haven't already mentioned before. I did want to draw attention to the fact that Milo is voiced by Yuri Lowenthal, who you may recognize as Simone the Digger in Gurren Lagann or Peter in Insomniac's Spider-Man. The moment I heard his voice, I was like, oh my god, it's the guy that's in everything. On top of that, Clagger is voiced by Roger Craig Smith, who is the current game actor for Sonic, and Chris Redfield in Resident Evil 5 and 6. This is an incredibly star-studded cast, and there is no weak link here. Not only is everyone incredibly well written, the key thing for me is that every character is flawed, but still ends up being likable at the end of the show. Even villains like Silco and Jinx, who are clearly doing some incredibly horrible things, have understandable motivations. Hell, I initially hated Marcus in the first act and thought he would never be someone I actually sympathized with, but when I saw that his child was being held hostage by Silco, I changed my tune. Every person is humanized in some way, from Silco growing soft because of his love for Jinx, Vi's struggles with grief, Jinx's mental issues, and Jace's battle with morality. Every character has a story to tell, and you want to see where the story takes them, even if it isn't a happy ending. These characters are absolutely wonderful, and I eagerly await to see what lies ahead for them in Season 2. With all this being said, all that's left to talk about is the presentation of the series, and dear God, I'll try to keep this short since this video has gone on longer than intended, but hot damn is this show pretty. When it comes to animation, I have seen and reviewed many different types, from the dull and unimaginative likes of Danganronpa the animation, to the surprisingly stellar depths of Assassination Classroom. There are so many ways to approach animation and make it stand apart from the crowd, but I have to say that Arcane is one of the best that I've bore witness to, combining 2D and 3D animation to create something I've never seen before. Fortiche approaches each frame of animation as a painting, creating the skeleton using 3D models and layering the 2D imagery on top of it to create the feel of a moving storyboard or a living painting. It's so diverse and vibrant that every time I come back to the animation, I am still shocked by the detail. The lighting is top-notch, bringing across the mood of each scene perfectly, in much the same way that Afro Samurai and Fullmetal Alchemist did. The framing and transitions between scenes are also so good that they make you pay more attention to each individual second of animation for hidden details that are actually there. I personally had a bit of a problem with the motion blur used for a bit of the first episode, since it made me a bit motion sick, and there are flashing lights used for the effects of Jinx's PTSD, which could upset photosensitive viewers, but those are very minor aspects of this animation. Even if some of this won't gel with everyone, I understand why it was done. I think the big example for me when comparing techniques is Cloverfield. While there are some things people have disagreed with me on for story and character, there really isn't a reason for them to use shaky cam for the entire film. Yes, it's a personal distraction, but in terms of filmmaking, it doesn't make it more realistic. When you compare it with Arcane cinematography, you can immediately tell the difference. The parkour scene puts the audience in the same position of these characters, and realistically, your vision would blur there and in the fight. It's a neat idea, and it works because it's not overused. When you are watching Jinx, you see things from her perspective as she sees ghosts around her and hears the voices of her dead friends. It's incredibly eerie and explains so much through visuals alone, which is something that should be focused on. Less dialogue and more storytelling through visuals and sound design. Speaking of sound design, let's talk about the music. It perfectly illustrates the dichotomy between the lanes with its old school grungy feel, along with music that feels pulled out of the post-apocalyptic wasteland in Fallout. Meanwhile, Piltover is home to classical, sophisticated music and sounds that work with the themes of this wealth disparity. There are also a lot of style mashups, as seen with Echo vs. Jinx and their combination of pop and rap to create something unique. Every piece of music is chosen specifically for the episode, and when it comes to songs that actually have vocals, they pull out all the stops. Whenever one is featured in an episode, they create something akin to a music video, which is no more evident than that Echo vs. Jinx fight. I also have to give major praise to Sting for the final song, What Could Have Been, because of how well the lyrics thematically fit the characters. The rest of the vocal soundtrack is awesome and does a great job investing me into each episode. However, the true standout for me is the opening theme song by Imagine Dragons, Enemy. I personally never skip the theme song for Arcane because it is just so damn good, combining solemn classical musical instruments with rap and rock to create something that is both haunting and energetic. Unfortunately, I am not as big of a fan of how the visuals for the theme are presented. I do think the transitions, cinematography, and framing are amazing, but it feels just a tad lacking for me. When you have animation this amazing for the rest of the show, I feel like the opening visuals should match that level of intensity, and while they certainly aren't bad, they don't wow me either. Either way though, nothing can really change the fact that Arcane is a triumph on just about every level. Even the minor issues I have are not important to the feeling that I get at the end. This is a fantastic show, but we knew that already. The question is, why is Arcane such a fantastic show? And the answer is very simple. Passion. The director truly wanted this to happen, to the point that he scrapped the project halfway through for quality control. They knew they wanted something for fans and put attention to detail, character, and story above all else. They already had glorious animation, but they were willing to sacrifice Fortiche for making a show that they could really be proud of, and it shows in spades. I'm gonna be real with you though, another big reason why Arcane is so damn good is that the video game curse was broken long ago. I hear it at least twice a year now, with shows and movies such as Castlevania, the Sonic movies, and Cyberpunk Edgerunners. Licensed media isn't the throwaway cash grab that it used to be because gamers stopped buying it and producers were forced to actually care about the product they were producing. The backlash from the Sonic movie trailer alone shows that producers can't get away with the type of passionless adaptations that they used to be known for. Arcane is a testament of drive, passion, and shifting attitudes on licensed media that finally allows for groundbreaking, emotional, and thought-provoking stories based on these mascots, some of whom didn't have a personality initially. It's not just down to the looks. Arcane is a spectacle in the way it handles its complex story and amazingly damaged characters, and it's a ride I hope everyone gets to experience at some point in their life. Christian and Alex wanted to create a show that would honor the series and tell a story that would resonate with fans old and new, and they succeeded with flying colors. This is one I will be returning to again and again for a long time. A long damn time. So, since we've already given out the stamp for Arcane, I figured that now is as good of a time as any to look back at last year and reflect a bit. This is something that up until now we've made into separate videos, but much like Linkara does with the end of year lists, I figured that it'd be better to incorporate them in our first video of the year as opposed to the year in reviews occupying their own slot in the playlist. So let's reflect, shall we? 2022 was a weird year for me and the Bun Squad because while I am happy with a lot that we managed to put out, and I feel our quality was greatly improved, the quantity was not the best. At the start of the year, I had to move across town to a new apartment, which stopped production for 2 months, and as the year progressed, I discovered that I had Lyme disease, and that took a while to get diagnosed and properly dealt with. This caused streams to cease for the most part, and many of my planned videos had to be pushed to this year and beyond since I couldn't function on any level. The Despair arc was already meant to be done by now, if you could believe it, but so much has happened since 2021 that it's meant that we're only now reaching the halfway point of the arc with the Danganronpa 2 video, which will be next for all of you wondering about it. It's going to happen. However, while all of this was going on, I was also able to create some of my best content thus far. We were able to explore some of my favorite horror films with Dracula and Coraline, experience the high of Transformers Animated, and the low of Danganronpa the Animation, and continue Zenhu with Edge of Destruction. I put my heart and soul into these episodes, and the positive reception has warmed my heart. Our storyline also started shifting into some of the ideas that we've had in our heads for a good while now, and we are eager to show you all the rest of what we have in store for it. the ending segment from Danganronpa the animation alone had us really proud with what we were able to accomplish, and I'm happy to say that even better segments are already in the works and scripted. That being said though, the main series is not the only thing that we've been working on. Because of my health issues and a slight feeling of burnout, I started 2 new series, Midnight Combo Pack and Bun Plays, which began as experiments but quickly turned into full-blown series thanks to all of your support. The Dante's Inferno and Hat in Time episode was a labor of love, and so many people have reacted so positively that I am shocked and in tears, to be honest. There will certainly be more to come, in addition to more Bun Plays Sonic, which was another series I thought would go nowhere since Let's Plays aren't as big these days. But you Buns have shown up for me in a big way, and I greatly look forward to finishing the classic Sonic block in 2023 as we move on to Sonic CD. As far as the new year is concerned, Arcane is the first major Bun Squad episode and kind of 3rd year anniversary. Sadly, we're already far removed from the actual anniversary date yet again, which, just for some clarification, is the 28th of November, so this video's status as the anniversary episode is a bit shaky. When's the Danganronpa 2 analysis coming out? Soon. And next, for that matter, can't stress that enough. Again, we had no intentions of stretching that marathon out as long as we have, but I hope the massive lengths of these videos, as well as all the stuff that has happened in our lives, has made you Buns realize why it's taken as long as it has. In any event, despite all the issues this year, we managed to accomplish a lot, and I hope to continue this momentum well into 2023 and beyond. I am feeling better than ever before and am full of Zenergy, so get ready for more Midnight Combo Pack, more Bun Plays, more Bun Squad goodness, and more Zen than you could ever ask for. In any event, I'm Zenith Warrior Princess, the cutest of buns, and thank you so much for watching. I cannot stress that enough. If you liked this video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe so that you too can join the Bun Squad, my legion of cute, fluffy bunnies that support my videos. And while you're at it, feel free to support me over on Patreon. Special thanks to our amazing editor Tifa, Kyle Huxtable, and Seraphim for supporting the channel already. Also, massive shout out to Eliza, who's a friend and patron who helped out with the PTSD discussion, along with a few others who will remain anonymous. And as always, don't forget to hit that bell so that you can be notified of every new video. Have a good one, everybody.